Good afternoon. How's everybody doing?
Good.
I want to start off by thanking John Wilhelm and Peter Schmitz for inviting me to speak about CASA today. It's an honor to be here with all of you. I actually grew up around Rotarians in Metro Manila in the Philippines. My father was one of the very first presidents for the Rotary Club in Metro Manila. So I can honestly say that it was my father, his name is Dr. Pedro Dinglasan, who first exposed me to one of the most important mottos that Rotary has, service above self. And it's something my friend John Paul Ferrer reminds me of daily. I can vividly remember being a young child, so I was a small chubby kid, and my father would bring me in the car to Rotary meetings, to luncheons just like this. And he would usually sit me in the corner and then buy me a plate of food and then pray that I would behave while he and his fellow Rotarians met. Because I love food, I always behave. So it worked out. But I can also say that the first time I ever saw service above self in action was with my father and with his fellow Rotarians. A volcano erupted in the Philippines called Mount Pinatubo, and several provinces were devastated, covered in ash and mud. People lost their homes. And I remember being in a car and wondering where we were going, and it was because my father and his Rotarian colleagues actually went to the provinces because they were doing relief programs for the people that had lost their homes out there. It was the first time that I can honestly say that I was exposed to the service above self motto that Rotary has. And so I actually feel like I've come full circle in a way, because here I am, standing in front of Rotarians at the Rotary Club of Metropolitan Chicago, Rotary One, to talk to you all about some of the most compassionate and brave volunteers that I've ever met. And they're called court-appointed special advocates. You know how to use a clicker. Imagine that. Court-appointed special advocates, or CASA, was actually started 40 years ago by a judge named Judge Suka. He was in his courtroom in Seattle, Washington. It was called King County. He was in the courtroom and he realized that out of all the individuals that were in that courtroom, there was not one person whose specific job it was to advocate for the child, to solely just focus on that one child, and to give him all the information on that one child. So that very same week, Judge Suka had a brown bag luncheon, and he invited potential volunteers to come to his courtroom to discuss putting together an organization that would do just that. Train everyday people to advocate for children in foster care. And as you can see, 40 years later, there are almost 1,000 CASA programs across the nation in 49 states, including the District of Columbia. I am the executive director for CASA's operations here in Chicago, CASA of Cook County. There are 31 CASA offices here in Illinois, so I know Walt works very well with CASA Lake County, and a good friend of mine over there, Terry Greenberg. The difference for us here in Chicago and for Cook County is that a third of all the children in Illinois' foster care system are found right here in Cook County and in Chicago. These children ended up in the system because somewhere along the way, somebody witnessed some form of abuse or neglect. The DCFS hotline was called. DCFS came in and investigated what was happening, and if deemed unsafe for the child, DCFS will then pull that child out of their home. Now, once the child is pulled out of the home, and this is very important to understand, they're not allowed to go back into that home. So they can't bring their toys, they can't bring their pictures, they can't bring their clothes. Many times these children will show up at the police station, at a foster care agency, with a garbage bag of clothes that was gathered for them by somebody else who went into their home for them. So what we can really say is that these children have ended up in these situations by no fault of their own, right? Now, once these children are in the system, they're given a case. And these cases are heard by the Child Protection Division at the Cook County Juvenile Center, where CASA is based. It's heard by one of our 15 child protection judges. Now, our system is designed to work. It really is. After working with the 15 judges in the Child Protection Division and working with our presiding judge, Judge Patricia Martin, I've come to understand now more than ever that the foster care system, the child protection system, is designed to work here in Chicago, where once a child is pulled out of their home, they're assigned a caseworker, they're given medical support, they're given an education plan, and there's a ton of paperwork that gets put into place to make sure that this child is okay. The problem is, and it's part of the reason that I'm here today, the problem is that our system in Cook County, and for many foster care agencies and systems across the U.S., the problem and our challenge is that the system is incredibly overburdened. It is just not humanly possible to follow up with each one of the children that are on this case. I've met caseworkers that have 15 children assigned to them, and they'll tell you, any caseworker will tell you, there's some real true believers out there. There's just not enough time in the day to make sure that all 15 of their children that they're assigned are taken care of. And so that's when CASA comes into play. The moment a judge realizes that the parties on the case, the attorneys, the caseworker, all those people are overburdened, they enter in an official court order saying, we want CASA on this case. The court order comes up to our office at the Cook County Juvenile Center, and we will assign a court-appointed special advocate to the case. Now, our CASAs come from all walks of life. For many of you that didn't know, I'm going to put her on the spot. Belinda was actually one of our long-standing CASAs. She was a CASA long before I arrived at CASA of Cook County. So could we all give Belinda a round of applause? I actually just found out she was a CASA all the way in 2008, from 2008, and she just recently took a leave of absence to take care of her family first. But she's just one of our many brave volunteers. They come from all walks of life. Anyone can apply to be a CASA. There are 4 Saturdays of training, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And then at the end of the training, you're sworn in by one of our 15 judges. And you'll spend 10 to 15 hours every month visiting the child, the foster parents, the schools, the health clinics. And your sole purpose is to investigate and to advocate for the needs of that child. To make sure that no child, the one child you're assigned to, our CASAs are only assigned to one child for the entire duration. One child or set of siblings, Belinda. Thanks for the look, because I'm incorrect. She had 4 kids on her case. We've had some CASAs with as many as 9 kids on their case. But you devote your time just to that one child. We also ask you to do 12 hours of continuing education throughout the year. Now, just some stats for everybody. When a child is assigned a CASA, and this is from our National CASA office in Seattle, you can see that a child is more likely to pass all their courses in school, less likely to have poor conduct in school, less likely to be expelled. And you can see the other things that they'll experience. They'll experience fewer out-of-home placements. Out-of-home placement means the number of times you're getting moved from one home to another while you're in the foster care system. Will receive significantly more services. When you have a CASA, it's your CASA that's saying, my child needs therapy because they had physical abuse. My child needs dental services. My child needs glasses, right? So that's where the CASA comes in. They'll receive increased connectivity. Many times, ladies and gentlemen, what you will see when we talk about our children, while they're in foster care, their CASA is going to be the most steady adult figure in their life for the entire time that they're in the foster care system. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that 1/3 of all the children in Illinois' foster care system are here in Cook County. You can see from the slide exactly what that number is. That's 5,780 children. When these children are in the foster care system, they'll see a revolving door of adults that are going to come through their life. Different therapists, different caseworkers, different attorneys, different judges. And many times, some of the children that I've spoken to say the same thing. They all ask me the same questions. Tell me about your mom. Tell me about your life. So many times our children get tired of answering the same questions, right? And this is for the entire time that they're in the foster care system. And here in Cook County, we will have young people that will spend up to 20 years in the foster care system. Now let's take it a step further. You can see that 3 out of every 10 adult homeless in our nation are actually from the foster care system. You'll learn, as I have learned from working with my CASAs and with my team, that 7 to 13% of these children in foster care will actually enroll in post-secondary education. And if you think that's a daunting number, you find out that only 1% will actually earn a degree. Another study done by our National CASA office found that, and this is of children, young people in foster care. These are our children. 50% of young women were pregnant before they were 19. Right? 25% of their male counterparts had fathered a child. 80% of young men had been arrested before they turned 25. And 60% had been convicted of a crime. I was once told by one of our long-standing CASA volunteers that when you hear about those kind of challenges that our youth encounter, there are 2 heroes that come up in the story of the life of a foster child. And this is for somebody that's been supporting CASA here in Chicago for 7 years. The first hero that you have to acknowledge is the foster parent. It's very hard to be a foster parent. And many times what happens, especially here in Chicago, is we're bombarded with bad stories about foster parents and what goes on in foster homes. But then you come to realize, as I've realized, that there are a lot of really amazing heroes, passionate foster parents in this city that care about these kids and want to give these kids a home. But even they can get stretched thin, especially now in the current climate that we find ourselves here in Illinois. A lot of the financial support that a foster parent is supposed to get, they're not currently getting. Right? And then these are the same foster parents that have to argue with the school because their child that they're taking care of still hasn't gotten their mentoring services, their tutoring services. This is the same parent that has to argue with the hospital for why their child still hasn't gotten their therapy services. This is the same foster parent that has to argue as to why their child still hasn't gotten their glasses yet. So they're stretched thin, but that's when the second hero in the story of the life of a foster child comes in, the CASA. And it was very eye-opening for me when the supporter of ours told me this, because she was absolutely right. The CASA is going to dedicate their volunteer time to taking that fight on for the foster parent. The CASA is going to advocate for the best needs of the child. We train our CASAs, especially now, since I've taken over the organization, we train our CASAs to collaborate. We just had a great discussion here at our table about the Department of Children and Family Services here in Illinois. There's a new director for Illinois, and there's a new director for Cook County. They have some brave goals for how they want to change the system and make it better. And it is incumbent upon CASA to collaborate with DCFS, with the attorneys, with our judges, and find out how are we all going to work together. It is our CASAs that will bridge the gap in those conversations, and where our judges cannot be, where the attorneys cannot